Have you ever felt that there's something blocked inside you? A perception that should be active but lies dormant? Like there's a locked door in the center of your mind, and you lost the key a long time ago, or someone deliberately hid it from you. I'm not talking about imagination. I'm talking about something physical, real, measurable. A small gland, the size of a grain of rice, located in the exact geometric center of your brain. The ancients called it the seat of the soul. Mystics knew it as the third eye. Modern science calls it the pineal gland. And it's there, right now, inside your skull. But it's probably not functioning as it should. Why? Because it was calcified, hardened, sealed. And this didn't happen by accident. There's a story they never told you in churches. A story that was erased from the official Gospels, buried in texts considered heretical, whispered only among those who were initiated into the deepest mysteries. It's the story of a secret teaching that Jesus transmitted only to his innermost circle. It wasn't about blind faith. It wasn't about obedience. It was about activation, awakening, direct vision. Jesus touched the foreheads of his chosen disciples. A simple gesture, a gentle pressure between the eyebrows. And something happened. They saw, not metaphorically, literally. Dimensions previously invisible opened before them. The illusion of matter dissolved. They perceived the true nature of reality and recognized the forces keeping humanity imprisoned. But that knowledge was dangerous, too dangerous to be left free. So, over the centuries, something changed. The ritual was maintained. Even today, priests touch the foreheads of the faithful during confirmation. But the power was removed. The gesture remained empty. The technique lost. And the gland that should be the portal to truth was systematically deactivated, generation after generation. You might think this is conspiratorial. You might think it's exaggerated. But answer this. When was the last time you had a spiritual perception so clear, so vivid, so undeniable that you didn't need faith to believe, because you simply saw, as a child perhaps? Before age 7, when your pineal still functioned, you saw shadows that no one else saw. You felt presences. You knew things without anyone teaching you. And then gradually, that disappeared. They told you it was imagination, that you matured, that it was time to stop believing in fantasies. But what if it wasn't fantasy? What if it was real perception that was blocked? The pineal gland is not just any organ. It contains photoreceptors, light-sensitive cells, just like your physical eyes. But unlike your eyes, which capture the visible spectrum of matter, the pineal was designed to perceive frequencies beyond matter, non-physical dimensions, energetic realities, consciousnesses that exist beyond the reach of the 5 senses. When it's active, you don't need to believe anything. You simply know. You see through lies instantly. You recognize manipulation before it reaches you. You perceive the difference between true light and false light, between real freedom and prisons disguised as comfort. And that's exactly why it needed to be shut down. The Gnostic texts speak of forces called Archons, not as demons with horns, but as structures of control. Thought patterns, invisible systems that keep humanity trapped in a limited perception of reality. And their greatest weapon was never physical violence. It was spiritual blindness. If you can't see the prison, you'll never look for the exit. Today, your pineal is calcified, hardened by fluoride in water, synthetic calcium in processed foods, excessive artificial light, constant exposure to frequencies that dysregulate your perception. All of this is sold as progress, as convenience, as healthcare. But the effect is always the same. The gland hardens, vision closes, and you remain trapped in material perception, exactly where they want you to be. But here's the truth they didn't foresee. The pineal can be reactivated. What was calcified can be cleaned. What was sealed can be reopened. And if you've made it this far, if something inside you recognized these words as truth, even before understanding them rationally, it's because your gland isn't completely dead yet. There's still light passing through. And tonight, you're going to learn how to make it shine again. The lost teaching. What Jesus really did with his disciples. There's a text that most people have never read, not because it's hard to find, but because it was declared heretical by the church in the 4th century. It's called the Gospel of Thomas, and in it, there's a passage that has confused scholars for 2,000 years. The disciples asked Jesus, "Show us the place where you are, because we need to seek it." They weren't asking for a physical address. They were asking about his state of consciousness, where he existed spiritually, how he perceived reality so differently, what he saw that they couldn't see. Jesus' answer wasn't a parable. It wasn't a comforting metaphor. He said, "The light within the person of light illuminates the whole world. If it doesn't shine, there is darkness." And then he stopped. No additional explanation, no context, as if it were obvious to anyone who had eyes to see. But what was he saying exactly? For centuries, theologians interpreted this as something symbolic: spiritual light, inner goodness, divine grace, all those abstract things that sound beautiful but don't take you anywhere. Because Jesus wasn't being poetic. He was describing something physical, anatomical, functional. He was talking about the pineal gland. The ancient Christian mystics understood this immediately because they still had access to the internal teachings, to the initiation rituals that weren't shared publicly. They knew that Jesus wasn't just preaching, he was teaching a technique, a practice, a method of activation. Another text, the Gospel of Philip, describes this more clearly. It speaks of a ritual called the sealing. Jesus placed his hand on the foreheads of his chosen disciples, exactly between the eyebrows. The text says this wasn't just a symbolic blessing. It was a transmission, a frequency transfer. Something happened in that moment, something physical, not just emotional. The disciple felt heat, pressure behind the eyes, a tingling that spread inward into the skull, to the exact center of the head. And then, vision changed. Not the physical vision of the eyes, but the perception of reality. Layers that were invisible a second before became perceptible. Hidden forces became visible. The curtain between the material world and spiritual dimensions dissolved. This wasn't magic. It was pineal activation. Jesus was touching the exact point where the gland is located, right behind the frontal bone, in the geometric center of the brain. And through the touch, through focused intention, through the frequency he carried, he unlocked what was dormant. He opened the third eye. And here's the crucial detail. He didn't do this with everyone, only with the inner circle, only with those he called chosen. Why? Because not everyone was ready. Not everyone could handle what they would see. Most people live comfortably within the illusion. They don't want to see the truth. They want security. They want ready-made answers. They want external authority to tell them what to think, what to believe, how to live. But the chosen ones were different. They felt something was wrong with consensual reality. They asked questions that made people uncomfortable. They didn't accept superficial answers. They wanted to see for themselves. And Jesus recognized that in them. He saw that the light within them still shone, even if dim, even if blocked. And he knew that if he activated their pineal, they would see. And once they saw, they could no longer be controlled. The Gnostic texts call these people pneumatics, those who carry spirit, those who don't completely belong to this material world. They live here, but never feel totally at home. There's always a sense of displacement, of exile, as if they vaguely remember another place, another way of existing, but can't fully access that memory. If you're listening to this now and something inside you is saying, "Yes, I know exactly what he's talking about," it's because you're one of them. You always were. And your pineal, even calcified, is still trying to function. That's why you pick up on things other people don't. You feel the energy of environments. You know when someone is lying before they finish their sentence. You have dreams that seem more real than waking life. You perceive patterns, synchronicities, signs that most ignore. But you also feel frustration because you should see more, know more, perceive more clearly. And you're right, you should, because your gland was designed to function as an organ of direct perception, not blind faith, not belief, vision, immediate knowledge, gnosis. Jesus knew this. And he taught the chosen how to reactivate what had been shut down, how to clean what had been blocked, how to open the eye that the power structures of that time, and of all times since then, wanted to keep closed. Because a person with an active pineal is dangerous. They can't be manipulated by propaganda, can't be controlled by fear, can't be imprisoned by dogmas. They see through all of it instantly, and when you see the truth, you become free. And free people don't obey. They create, they transform, they break systems. And that's exactly what Jesus did. He didn't found a religion. He initiated a rupture of consciousness. And then they killed him and buried the teaching and transformed everything into empty ritual, Dead doctrine, institutional obedience. The gesture remained. Priests still touched the foreheads of the faithful, but the power disappeared. The technique was lost, and the gland was systematically calcified, generation after generation, until most people don't even know it exists. But you know, and now you know why. The anatomy of the third eye, what's really inside your skull. Let's talk about science for a moment. Not the science that denies the spiritual, but the science that, without realizing it, confirms what mystics always knew. Because the pineal gland is not a metaphor. It's real, physical, measurable, and its structure is absolutely strange. It's located in the exact center of your brain, not to the left, not to the right in the middle, between the two hemispheres, behind the eyes, at eyebrow level. If you draw a straight line from your forehead to the back of your head and another line from ear to ear, they cross exactly where the pineal is. Point 0, the geometric center of your physical consciousness. Now, here's the strange part. The pineal has photoreceptors, light-sensitive cells, just like your eyes. It contains rods and cones, the same types of cells that capture images in the physical world. It even has a lens-like structure. Anatomists who first studied it were confused. Why is there an eye inside the brain? An eye that never sees external light, that's buried in complete darkness, protected by layers of bone and tissue? The obvious answer for materialist science is evolution, remnant of something that was once useful. A vestigial third eye, like reptiles still have on top of their skulls, something that lost function over millions of years. But this explanation only makes sense if you believe that the only light that exists is physical light, the light you see with your eyes, the light that hits surfaces and creates solid images. But what if there's another type of light? A light that isn't reflected by matter but emanates from consciousness itself. A light that doesn't travel in physical space, but permeates dimensions beyond matter. If that light exists, and all of humanity's spiritual traditions say it does, then you need an organ to perceive it, and that organ is the pineal. The ancients weren't ignorant. They didn't call it the third eye because it sounded nice. They called it that because it functions like an eye, except instead of seeing the material world, it sees the spiritual world. Instead of capturing photons reflected by solid objects, it captures frequencies of consciousness, energetic dimensions, non-physical realities that exist parallel to this one, but invisible to the 5 common senses. When the pineal is functioning, you perceive things that aren't out there in the material sense, but are absolutely real in the experiential sense. You see auras around people, not as imagination, but as direct perception of energetic fields. You feel presences in environments, not because you're paranoid, but because your pineal is detecting vibrational signatures that your physical eyes don't capture. You have out-of-body experiences that are so vivid, so coherent, so full of new information that it's impossible to reduce them to just a dream. You perceive synchronicities not as coincidences, but as evidence that reality is far more interconnected and conscious than it appears. And you know instantly when someone is lying, not because you analyzed body language, but because your pineal read the frequency behind the words. This is what Jesus activated in the chosen disciples, that direct perception, that vision without filters, and that's exactly why he said, "The light within the person of light illuminates the whole world." Because when the pineal functions, you're no longer dependent on external information. You access truth directly, from within, without intermediaries. Now, modern science recognizes that the pineal produces a substance called melatonin. It's the hormone that regulates your sleep and wake cycles. When it gets dark, the pineal releases melatonin and you feel sleepy. When it gets light, production decreases and you wake up. This is fact, proven, accepted. But there's something official science doesn't talk about much, or talks about in a low voice, cautiously, because the implications are disturbing. The pineal also produces DMT, dimethyltryptamine, one of the most powerful psychedelic substances known, the same molecule found in sacred plants used by shamans for thousands of years. The same substance that, when ingested, completely dissolves material perception and throws you into dimensions where time doesn't exist, where conscious entities appear, where you experience death and rebirth in minutes. And that substance is being produced naturally inside your brain, by the pineal, especially during deep sleep. during deep meditations, and, according to some researchers, during death. In the last moments before the body stops, the pineal releases a massive dose of DMT, and that's what causes near-death experiences. The light at the end of the tunnel, the life review, the encounter with beings of light. Except here's the problem. If your pineal is calcified, it doesn't work properly. It doesn't produce DMT in the necessary quantity. It doesn't open spiritual perception during life. And when you die, it doesn't give you enough clarity to perceive the truth. You become confused, disoriented, vulnerable. And entities operating in those dimensions, the Gnostic texts call them Archons, can manipulate you, guide you where they want, convince you to reincarnate, to return to the material prison, because you didn't see clearly enough to recognize the exit. Jesus knew this. The Gnostics knew this. All mystics who went through true initiations knew this. The pineal isn't just a physical organ. It's the portal, the bridge between matter and spirit, between prison and freedom, between illusion and truth. And when you activate it during life, when you clean the calcification and restore function, you don't need to wait for death to see. You see now. You perceive manipulations now. You recognize the difference between true light and false light now. And when the time comes to depart, you won't be deceived, because your vision will be clear. That's the difference between someone with an active pineal and someone with a calcified pineal. One sees through the curtain. The other lives inside it thinking it's all that exists. One is free. The other is a prisoner who doesn't even know they're imprisoned. And now comes the question that matters. Why is your pineal calcified? Why was something so essential, so powerful, so central to your spiritual perception systematically shut down? Who benefits from your blindness? And what did they do to ensure you never discovered what you can really see? The systematic calcification. How they closed your third eye without you noticing. When you were a child, you saw things. Do you remember? Shadows moving on their own in the dark room. Presences you felt but couldn't explain. Maybe you talked about it with your parents, and they told you it was imagination, that monsters don't exist, that you were daydreaming, and gradually you stopped seeing, not because you matured, but because your pineal began to calcify. This happens with almost all children. Around age 7, spiritual vision begins to disappear. Perceptions become less intense. Dreams lose that vivid quality, that strange coherence that made you wake up questioning which was the real world. And by the time you reach adolescence, calcification is so advanced that you don't even remember what it was like to see clearly. Science calls this normal development, brain maturation. But studies show something disturbing. By age 17, most pineal glands are already significantly calcified. By 30, the average pineal appears on X-rays as a dense white mass. Calcium phosphate crystals hardening the tissue, blocking function, sealing perception. This isn't natural aging, it's systematic poisoning, and it begins the day you're born. Let's talk about fluoride. They say it's to prevent cavities, that it's a public health measure, that adding fluoride to drinking water was one of the great victories of preventive medicine. And maybe it's true that fluoride prevents cavities. But what they don't tell you is that fluoride accumulates in the pineal gland faster than anywhere else in the body. The pineal attracts fluoride like a magnet, and once inside, it binds to calcium and forms crystals, hard crystals, permanent, that block the gland's function. Every time you drink tap water, brush your teeth with fluoridated toothpaste, eat processed foods made with fluoridated water, you're depositing another layer of calcification on your third eye. And this is sold as care, as science, as progress. Then comes calcium. You need calcium, right? For strong bones, for healthy teeth. So they add synthetic calcium to everything. Orange juice, breakfast cereals, breads, plant milks, daily supplements. And your body absorbs that calcium, but can't use it all. The excess circulates in the bloodstream, and the pineal, being one of the organs with the highest blood flow in the body, receives a concentrated dose. The calcium deposits, the crystals grow, the gland hardens, and your spiritual vision weakens a bit more. But no one warns you. No one talks about this, because officially, the pineal does nothing except regulate sleep. It's just a small gland, insignificant, an evolutionary remnant without much importance. But you know that's not true. You always knew. Now, artificial light. Your ancestors lived under natural light cycles, sun during the day, complete darkness at night. and the pineal responded to those rhythms. It produced melatonin in darkness, but also produced other substances, DMT in subtle doses, compounds that opened perception, that facilitated lucid dreams, visions, altered states of consciousness. But you don't live under natural cycles. You wake up with artificial light. You spend the day looking at screens that emit blue light. At night, more screens, more LEDs, always illuminated environments. Your pineal receives contradictory signals constantly. It can no longer distinguish day from night. The natural rhythm breaks, hormonal production dysregulates, and calcification accelerates. Do you think this is coincidence? That modern life, by chance, created exactly the conditions that block your spiritual perception? Think carefully. The water you drink contains fluoride. The food you eat is loaded with synthetic calcium and preservatives that accumulate in the body. You spend 12, 14, 16 hours a day exposed to artificial light. You sleep poorly, eat poorly, live stressed, bombarded by electromagnetic frequencies from cell phones, Wi-Fi, transmission towers. And your pineal? It's trying to function in the middle of that chaos, but it can't. It calcifies. It hardens. It stops producing what it should produce. And your spiritual vision, that direct perception you had as a child, disappears. And they tell you that you grew up, that you matured, that you stopped believing in fantasies. The Gnostics had a name for the forces that keep humanity trapped in ignorance. They called them Archons, not demons with horns and tridents, but structures, patterns, control systems that operate through limited perception. As long as you don't see beyond matter, you don't perceive the prison. As long as your pineal is calcified, you accept consensual reality as the only possible reality. And the Archons don't need to do anything violent. They don't need to force you. They just need to ensure you never activate the gland that would allow you to see through them. And they did that perfectly. Subtle poisoning, introduced slowly, sold as science, as health, as convenience. Fluoride in water, excess calcium, artificial light, dead food, chronic stress. All of this not only calcifies your pineal, it also keeps you in a state of constant survival. Always tired, always worried, always distracted, no time to question, no energy to meditate, no clarity to perceive that something is deeply wrong. And when you finally stop and ask, why do I feel so disconnected? Why does life seem so empty, even when I have everything they say I should want? The answer isn't outside, it's inside, in the center of your skull, in a gland the size of a grain of rice that was slowly transformed into stone. But here's what they didn't foresee. Here's the fatal flaw in their plan. Pneumatics, people like you, who carry the spark, maintain partial pineal function even through calcification. You don't see as clearly as you should, but you still see enough to know something is wrong. You still feel enough to search for answers. You still perceive enough to recognize truth when it appears. And that's why you're here now. Your pineal is compromised, but it's not dead. There's light passing through. And where there's light, there's hope. Because calcification isn't permanent. The blockage isn't absolute. The gland can be cleaned. Vision can be restored. The third eye can be reopened. And when that happens, everything changes. You no longer need to believe anything. You see. And when you see, you can no longer be deceived. The lost ritual, how Jesus activated vision in the chosen. There's a moment in the Gnostic Gospels that most people never understood. Jesus is with his closest disciples, not the crowds, not the curious, only the inner circle. Those he knew could handle what he was about to show. And he does something simple, so simple it seems insignificant. He places his hand on their foreheads. The Gospel of Philip calls this the sealing, not a baptism with water, not an anointing with oil, but a touch, direct, intentional, at the exact point between the eyebrows. And the text describes that something happened in that moment. The disciples felt heat, pressure, a tingling that descended inward into the skull, to the center of the head. And then they saw, not a vague mystical vision, not a comforting feeling of peace, but direct perception, sudden clarity, as if a curtain that had always been there but which they had never perceived was suddenly removed. And on the other side, dimensions, entities, forces, realities operating on frequencies their five senses never captured. They saw the Archons, the control structures, the illusions keeping humanity imprisoned. And they also saw the true light, the monad, the source, the exit. This wasn't a symbolic ritual. It was a physical activation. Jesus was touching the exact point where the pineal gland is located, and through the touch, through the frequency he carried, through focused intention, through something the texts call transmission, he unlocked what was dormant. He dissolved the calcification. He opened the third eye. And here's the crucial detail. He didn't do this with everyone, only with the chosen. Why? Because not everyone was ready. Not everyone could process what they would see. Most people live comfortably within the illusion. They don't want to see the truth. They want security. They want ready-made answers. They want someone to tell them what to do, what to think, how to live. But the pneumatics were different. They already felt something was wrong. They already questioned. They already searched. And Jesus recognized that. He saw the light within them, even if weak, even if blocked. And he knew that if he activated their pineal, they would see. And once they saw, they could no longer be controlled. The touch was just the trigger. The real work happened internally. The gland responded like a tuning fork. A frequency was transmitted, and the pineal, which was dormant, calcified, blocked, began to vibrate again. The calcification didn't disappear instantly, but something changed. A channel opened. Light began to pass through. The texts say that after the sealing, the disciples were never the same. They saw things other people didn't see. They knew things that hadn't been taught. They recognized lies instantly. They perceived manipulations before they happened. And most importantly, they no longer feared death, because they had seen beyond it. They knew that physical death wasn't the end. It was just a transition, and they knew exactly how to cross it without being captured. That was the true heresy. Not questioning Jesus's divinity, not doubting the resurrection, but knowing that you don't need intermediaries, that you can see for yourself. That truth isn't in scriptures, isn't in authorities, isn't in institutions. It's within you, in the gland that was designed to perceive spiritual dimensions directly. And that's why that teaching was buried. That's why the Gnostic Gospels were declared heretical. That's why the Roman Church kept the gesture. Even today, priests touch the foreheads of the faithful during confirmation, but removed the power. The ritual remained. The transmission disappeared. Imagine what would happen if every Christian could activate their pineal, if everyone could see directly, if everyone knew, without a shadow of doubt, what is truth and what is manipulation. There would be no more need for priests, for dogmas, for institutional authority. Each person would be their own portal to the divine. Each person would see clearly, and a people who see clearly cannot be controlled. So the church killed the teaching, kept the shell, the empty gesture, the dead ceremony. Millions of people receive confirmation every year. The priest touches their foreheads, and nothing happens, because there's no more transmission, no more intention, no more knowledge of how to activate what's dormant. But the technique didn't die completely. It survived. In underground Gnostic communities, from master to disciple, in silence, in secret, adapted, preserved. And now, 2,000 years later, it's returning, not through churches, not through institutions, but directly, from consciousness to consciousness, through those who still have enough light to recognize truth when they see it. You don't need Jesus to physically touch your forehead. You don't need a guru. You don't need anyone's permission. The technique can be done alone, tonight, with complete effectiveness, because the power was never in Jesus's hand. It was in the gland, and that gland is inside you now. Calcified, yes. Blocked, yes. But not dead, never completely dead. What Jesus did was create the conditions for the gland to remember its function. And you can create those same conditions, not through dogma, not through blind faith, but through technique, practice, focused intention. And the strangest thing, the most beautiful, the most dangerous for any control system is this. When you activate your pineal, when you open your third eye, you no longer need to believe anything. You simply see. And when you see truth directly, without filters, without intermediaries, without manipulation, the whole house of cards collapses. Lies become transparent. Control structures become visible. The Archons lose all power over you because you're no longer blind. You're no longer trapped in material perception. You see the dimensions they can't control, and you recognize the exit. Jesus knew this, and that's why they killed him. But the teaching survived, hidden, fragmented, but alive. And if you've made it this far, If something inside you is vibrating with these words even before understanding them rationally, it's because your pineal recognizes the frequency, it remembers, and it's ready to awaken again. The activation technique, how to reopen the third eye tonight. Now let's get to what really matters, the practice. The exact technique that can reactivate what was sealed. Not theory, not philosophy, but method, step by step. Something you can do tonight, alone, without needing anyone. And if you do it correctly, with intention, with presence, something will change. Maybe subtle at first, maybe profound, but it will change. You don't need to believe this will work. In fact, it's better if you don't believe, because belief can create expectation, and expectation can create illusion. What you need is to do, execute, follow the steps, and then observe what happens. Without judgment, without rush, just presence. First step, total darkness. Not relative darkness, not a room with a crack of light coming through the window, but absolute darkness. Turn off all lights. Unplug all devices that emit light. Cover LEDs from chargers, clocks, anything that glows. If necessary, use a blindfold over your eyes. The pineal activates most powerfully in the complete absence of external light. It's in that state that it naturally produces DMT, that it opens perception to non-physical dimensions. When you're in total darkness, your physical eyes stop working, and the pineal takes over. It becomes the primary eye, the eye that sees without material light, and that's exactly the state you need to create. Second step, sit comfortably. Don't lie down. You might fall asleep. And while sleep is powerful for the pineal, this technique requires waking consciousness. Sit with your spine straight, but relaxed. Hands on your thighs or in your lap. No tension, no effort. Just presence. Now bring your attention to the center of your forehead, behind your eyes, between your eyebrows, where the ancients placed the bindi, the red dot, where Jesus touched the disciples, where the pineal gland is located, in the exact geometric center of your skull. If it helps, place your index finger between your eyebrows. Press gently, feel the warmth, feel the texture of the skin, and then remove your finger, but keep your attention exactly on that point. You'll feel something, maybe a subtle tingling, maybe a slight pressure, maybe warmth, or maybe nothing obvious at first. It doesn't matter. Continue. Your attention by itself is already beginning to activate the gland, because where consciousness goes, energy flows. And the pineal responds to focused attention like no other organ in the body. Third step, breathe, but not just any breathing. 3 deep, slow, intentional breaths. On the first inhalation, imagine you're pulling pure light directly into the center of your head. Not physical light, conscious light. Light that has no color but contains all colors. Light that's intelligent, alive, divine. Breathe deeply and mentally see that light entering through the top of your head and descending straight to the pineal. Hold your breath for 3 seconds. Feel the light flooding the gland, warming it, dissolving the calcification, removing layers of blockage that have been there for years, perhaps decades. Now exhale. And as you exhale, imagine all the calcification, all the heaviness, all the blockage is leaving the body, dissolving into space. Exhale slowly, completely, until you empty your lungs and feel the relief, the space that opens. Do this 3 times. Inhale light, hold, exhale calcification. Each breath is a cleansing, a restoration, a reactivation. Fourth step, the activation phrase. Keep your attention on the third eye and pronounce, out loud or mentally, I am the light, not as a hopeful affirmation, not as something you wish to be, but as a declaration of what is true now. Your pineal is the organ that perceives the light of pure consciousness. By declaring I am the light, while your attention is focused on the gland, you're commanding it to remember its function. You're awakening what was dormant. Say it slowly. Feel each word. I am the light. First repetition, establishment. You're planting the seed. Second repetition, reinforcement. You're watering the seed. Third repetition, consolidation. You're sealing the activation. 3 times, always 3. Because 3 is the number of creation, of transcendence, of breaking duality. Jesus knew this. All initiates knew this. And now you know too. Fifth step, silence. After the third repetition, remain in silence. Don't force anything. Don't try to visualize anything. Don't expect anything. Just observe. Stay present, attentive, open, for 3 minutes. It might seem long at first, but it's necessary, because activation doesn't happen in the moment of declaration. It happens in the silence that follows. That's where the gland responds. That's where the frequency stabilizes. That's where light begins to pass through. Maybe you'll feel intense heat in your forehead. Maybe you'll see colors behind your eyelids. Purple, indigo, gold, white. Maybe you'll feel pressure, as if something is expanding inside your skull. Maybe you'll hear a subtle sound, a buzzing, a high-pitched tone, or maybe you won't feel anything obvious, and that's okay. Activation is occurring regardless of what you consciously perceive. Do this tonight, before sleep, in absolute darkness, and then do it again tomorrow night, and the following night, for 7 nights total, because calcification doesn't dissolve all at once. It was built over years, and it needs to be removed layer by layer. Each time you execute the technique, you clean a bit more. You restore more function. You open vision 1 degree more. And here's what you'll start to notice. In the first days, maybe nothing obvious, but around the 3rd or 4th day, signs begin to appear. Your dreams become vivid, extremely vivid. You remember them in detail, and they don't seem like ordinary dreams. They seem like real experiences in other dimensions. Teachings, encounters, messages. You begin to see through lies instantly. Someone tells you a story, and you know, without analyzing, without thinking, that it's false. You simply perceive the dishonesty behind the words. Not because you distrust, but because your pineal is reading the real frequency, not just the verbal content. Synchronicities explode. You think of someone, and that person messages you minutes later. You need information, and it appears in front of you in a way that's impossible to ignore. Reality begins to organize around you in ways that defy chance. Because you're no longer operating only in the material dimension, you're beginning to perceive the invisible connections, the web, the intelligence behind appearances. You may feel spontaneous warmth in your forehead during the day, a tingling between your eyebrows. That's the gland increasing blood flow, restoring function. Some people have mild headaches in the first days, pressure in the forehead. That's normal. It's the gland recalibrating. The headaches pass quickly, and then, around the 5th or 6th day, something changes profoundly. You begin to perceive energy around people, subtle fields, auras, not as imagination, but as direct perception. You enter environments and feel the vibration immediately, heavy, light, tense, harmonious. You don't need to ask, you know. And complex spiritual concepts you struggled to understand for years become perfectly clear in an instant. Not because someone explained them better, but because your pineal is receiving information directly, without filters, without distortions. Gnosis, immediate knowledge. If you experience 3 or more of these signs within 7 days, it's working. Your vision is opening. You're seeing the way Jesus taught the chosen, directly, clearly, without intermediaries. And here's the most important part. Don't stop after 7 days. Continue practicing, because calcification is persistent. The modern world continues bombarding you with substances and frequencies that block the pineal. So you need to keep cleaning, keep activating, until the gland is functioning fully, until your vision is permanent. This isn't magic. It's not superstition. It's technique, practice, method. The same method Jesus used, adapted so you can do it alone. Without a guru, without a church, without external authority, just you, your intention, and the gland that's always been inside you, waiting to be reactivated. What happens when you see the difference between blindness and spiritual vision? There's an invisible dividing line that separates humanity. It's not race, it's not social class, it's not religion. It's perception. On one side are those who live completely within the material illusion, accepting consensual reality as the only possible reality. On the other side are those who see beyond. And between these two states, there's an abyss so deep that the two life experiences are practically unrecognizable to each other. When your pineal is calcified, you live in a prison you don't perceive as a prison. You believe what they tell you. You trust authorities. You accept official narratives. You buy things you don't need to impress people who don't care. You work at jobs you hate to pay bills that never end. And deep down, very deep down, there's a feeling of emptiness, that something is missing, that life should be more than this. But you don't question much, because questioning hurts, because everyone around you is living the same way. And if everyone is doing it, it must be right. It must be normal. It must be how things are. And so you distract the pain, entertainment, social media, consumption, superficial relationships, alcohol, drugs, anything to not feel the emptiness, anything to not face the question that keeps hammering quietly. Is this it? That's life with a calcified pineal. It's not that you're stupid. It's not that you're not spiritual. It's that you're blind. Literally blind to dimensions that exist around you, but which you can't perceive. Like someone born without vision who thinks the world is only sound and touch. They don't know they're missing something, because they've never seen. Now imagine what happens when vision opens, when the pineal begins to function, when the third eye activates. Not gradually, not subtly, but like lightning, like waking from a nightmare and realizing all of it was just a dream. And the real world is much stranger, much vaster, much more complex than you ever imagined. The first thing you perceive is manipulation. It's everywhere. Propaganda isn't just commercial ads. It's the entire structure of society. They tell you how to think, how to dress, what to value, what to fear. And you see this happening in real time. You see the engineering behind the words, the agenda behind the news, the frequency behind the songs. You don't need to analyze. You simply know. Instantly. Someone is lying to you, and you feel it. Not because the story doesn't make sense logically, but because your pineal is reading the energy behind the words. And energy doesn't lie. Never. You can disguise words. You can manipulate body language, but you can't hide frequency. And when your third eye is open, you read frequency like other people read text. Then you begin to see the entities, not as literal monsters with horns and claws, but as patterns, energetic structures, thought forms that feed on certain emotions: fear, anger, despair, guilt, shame. You perceive that certain environments are full of these forms. Certain places drain your energy just by being there. Certain people carry these structures without knowing, and they propagate, like viruses, from mind to mind. The Gnostics called these structures Archons, and you finally understand what they were saying. It's not fiction. It's not mythology. It's precise description of something that exists, but can only be seen with an active pineal. They're parasitic patterns that feed on humanity by keeping it in low vibration states. And you see how they work. You see how they spread. You see how they control. But you also see the exit, because when your third eye is open, you perceive that matter isn't solid. It's frequency, vibration, and you can change your frequency. You can exit the band where Archons operate. You can elevate yourself to dimensions where they have no access. And when you do that, suddenly, manipulation no longer works. Fear no longer controls you. Propaganda no longer affects you, because you see through it. And then comes the strangest part. You begin to perceive that reality responds to you, not as brute force, not as instant magic, but as co-creation. You think of something, and synchronicities appear. You need an answer, and it manifests. Right people appear at the right time. Information emerges exactly when you need it, as if reality were conscious, as if it were listening, responding, collaborating. And you perceive it was always like this, but you were too blind to notice. Your attention was so focused on matter, on the physical, on the solid, that you didn't perceive the invisible connections, the web, the intelligence behind appearances. But now you see. And once you see, you can't look away. You can't pretend it's chance. You can't live as if matter were everything. Your dreams change completely. They're no longer just random processing of memories. They're experiences in other dimensions. You encounter conscious beings. You receive teachings. You visit places that seem more real than the physical world. And when you wake up, the information remains. You learned something. You grew. You went somewhere. And it wasn't imagination. It was real travel through dimensions your pineal can now access. And then comes the deepest knowledge, the most liberating, and also the most dangerous for any control system. You perceive that death is not the end, not as comforting belief, but as direct knowledge. You've already experienced dimensions beyond matter. You've already been conscious outside the body. You know that consciousness doesn't depend on the physical brain. It uses the brain, but it's not the brain. And when you know this, truly know, fear of death disappears. And with it, the main control mechanism that keeps humanity obedient disappears. Because if you're not afraid to die, you can't be threatened. You can't be blackmailed. You can't be forced to obey. You become free, truly free. That's the difference between living with a calcified pineal and living with it active, between blindness and vision, between prison and freedom. It's not just a difference of perspective, it's a difference of world. You literally inhabit a different reality. You see what others don't see. You know what others don't know. And you can't go back. You can't close your eyes and pretend you didn't see. And here's the part that most frightens control systems. When you activate your pineal, you no longer need them. You don't need authorities telling you what's real. You don't need institutions telling you what to think. You don't need gurus telling you what to believe. Because you see for yourself. You know directly. And direct knowledge can't be manipulated. Jesus knew this. That's why he activated the pineal only in the chosen. Because he knew that once activated, these people could no longer be controlled. They would see the truth, and the truth would set them free, not as a slogan, but as literal experience, direct vision, gnosis. And that's exactly why that teaching was buried. That's why the church kept the ritual but removed the power. That's why the pineal is systematically calcified from childhood. Because a people who see clearly is a people who don't obey. A people who know is a people who can't be deceived. And a free people is the end of every control system. But you still have a choice. You can continue as you are. You can ignore all of this. You can return to normal life, to comfortable blindness, to the prison that doesn't hurt because you don't know it's a prison. Or you can do the technique. You can activate the gland. You can open the third eye and see. And if you choose to see, know that there's no going back. Once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. Once you perceive manipulation, you can't ignore it. Once you know you're free, you can't accept chains. It's a choice, and only you can make it. So here we are, at the end of this journey, or perhaps at the beginning of another. You learned that Jesus wasn't just preaching love and forgiveness. He was teaching activation. He touched the foreheads of the chosen and opened in them something that most of humanity doesn't even know exists. The pineal gland, the third eye, the portal between matter and spirit, between illusion and truth. You learned that this gland was systematically calcified, not by accident, not by natural aging, but by subtle poisoning, fluoride in water, synthetic calcium in foods, artificial light without rest, all sold as progress, as science, as care. But the result is always the same: spiritual blindness, limited perception, comfortable prison. You learned that the Gnostics had a name for the forces that benefit from your blindness. Archons, control structures that operate through limited perception. As long as you don't see beyond matter, you don't perceive the prison. And as long as you don't perceive the prison, you never look for the exit. And you learned the technique, the same technique Jesus used, adapted so you can do it alone. Total darkness. 3 breaths bringing light to the center of the head. 3 repetitions of I am the light, focused on the third eye. 3 minutes of silence. 7 nights of practice. Simple, direct, powerful. But now comes the part that depends entirely on you. Because information without action is just entertainment. Knowledge without practice is just philosophy. You can watch this, agree with everything, feel it makes sense, and do nothing. And if that's the case, nothing will change. Your pineal will remain calcified, your vision will remain blocked, and life will continue exactly as it is. Or you can do differently. You can choose to act. You can choose to practice. You can choose to see. And if you do that, if you really execute the technique with presence, with intention, for 7 complete nights, something will change. Maybe subtly at first, maybe profoundly, but it will change. And when it changes, when your vision begins to open, when you begin to perceive what was always there but you couldn't see, you'll understand why this teaching was buried, why it was declared heretical, why it was removed from the official Gospels. Because truth liberates, and free people don't obey. So the question is, are you ready to see? Or do you prefer to remain comfortable in blindness? Only you can answer. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you recognized the truth in these words. Your pineal, even calcified, still has enough light to recognize the frequency, and that means you're one of the chosen, a pneumatic, someone who carries the spark. And if you want to continue this journey, if you want to learn more techniques, more practices, more teachings that were preserved in silence over the centuries, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, because this here is just the beginning. There's much more to explore, much more to activate, much more to see. And after watching, leave a comment below. It doesn't need to be long. It can just be a word, a reflection, something that resonated with you. Because when you publicly declare you're on this path, when you put into words what you felt, you anchor the intention, you seal the commitment, and something inside you changes. So do it now. Subscribe, comment, and tonight in the darkness execute the technique, without expectation, without rush, just presence, and see what opens. Your pineal was never broken, it was just sealed, and you've just learned how to break the seal. The rest is up to you.